The sounds you are hearing are the screams of a man named Serpent as he is burned alive. He is not being sacrificed to a god. He is being sacrificed to justice. High on the great rock platform of the Catskill Mountains, a tribe administered a terrible sentence for an unspeakable crime. This is the story of a forbidden love, a cynical wager, and a treacherous gift that brought a serpent's venom to a wedding feast. It is the story of how a single act of poisoned jealousy forever cursed the mountains, silencing its people and leaving the land haunted, waiting for the next tragedy to arrive. Before the white man came, before the Dutch traders carved their settlements along the Hudson, the mountains that rise against the western sky were known by the Mohican tribes as Onteora, the mountains of the sky. This was a sacred place, a land of deep cloves, silent forests, and whispering spirits. And on the great rock platform that juts out from South Mountain, the very precipice that would one day hold a grand hotel, the old chief Shandaken set his wigwam. Shandaken was a man of the mountains. He ruled his people with a wisdom born of the granite cliffs and the deep valleys. From this vantage point, he could survey his entire domain. The silver ribbon of the Hudson far below, and the endless green ocean of the forest. This platform was a place of power, a place of peace. And the heart of that peace was his daughter, Lotawana. Lotawana was the beauty of the mountain, sought in marriage by every brave who passed through her father's camp. But her heart was not hers to give. It had been pledged long ago in an early sacred vow to a young chief of the neighboring Mohawk tribe. Theirs was a love sanctioned by time and tradition, a bond that connected two great peoples. The camp of Shandaken was preparing for the celebration. The air was thick with anticipation for the wedding that would unite the tribes. But peace is a fragile thing, and in the burgeoning, noisy Dutch settlements of the valley below, new forces were at play. Greed, cynicism, and a darkness that had no respect for the sacred. Down in the valley, in the smoky taverns of the village of Catskill, men drank and made wagers. They were traders, trappers, and land speculators, men who saw the mountains not as a sacred home, but as a commodity, a trove of furs, timber, and land to be conquered. Among them, but never of them, was a man named Serpent. Serpent was a complete unknown, a specter who haunted the edges of civilization. He was proud, morose, and possessed a dark, brooding visage that set him apart from both the Dutch settlers and the native tribes. He claimed to be a stranger, a descendant of forgotten Egyptian kings, and he lived a solitary, shunned life in a small cabin near the treacherous Catskill Creek. He was a man of shadows, a figure of intense, unspoken desires, and his primary desire was Lotawana.
He had seen her, perhaps at a trading post or during a lone walk near the mountain's base. He became obsessed. He saw her not as a person, but as a prize, an exotic jewel of the wilderness that he, with his supposed royal blood, deserved to possess. He presented himself at Shandaken's camp, but his advances were met with polite, then firm refusal. Lotawana's heart was promised. Norseredin's pride, already brittle, began to crack.
His dark obsession became a public spectacle in the tavern at Catskill. One evening, a wealthy, tavern-lounging Dutchman, a speculator who saw the natives as mere pieces in a game, cornered the morose Norseredin.
"I hear the mountain princess has refused you," the Dutchman slurred, his face flush with gin. "1,000 golden crowns says you cannot win her. She prefers a savage Mohawk over the blood of Egyptian kings." The tavern roared with laughter. Norseredin's dark face flushed. He was stung by avarice. 1,000 crowns was a fortune, but he was cut deeper by the public humiliation. His passion, already dark, was now inflamed by greed and a burning need to prove his superiority. He accepted the wager.
He returned to the mountain platform and laid new siege to Lotawana's heart. He brought gifts he could not afford. He made promises he could not keep. He used every ounce of his cunning. And still, the girl, grounded in her simple, honest love for the Mohawk chief, refused to listen.
Frustrated, Norseredin confronted Chief Shandaken himself, perhaps demanding the chief intervene to break the vow. Shandaken, a man of patience, simply counseled the dark stranger to be content with the smiles of other maidens, for his daughter's heart was spoken for. This calm, paternal dismissal was the final insult. Norseredin, his pride and his wallet now both on the line, flew into a rage. He assailed the old chief, drawing a knife. But he was no match for the warriors of the mountain. He was beaten, disarmed, and driven from the camp with blows and profound disgrace. The wager was lost. His pride was shattered. His obsession, festering in the dark solitude of his cabin on Catskill Creek, curdled from desire into a cold reptilian need for vengeance. The wedding day of Lotawana and the Mohawk chief arrived. The great rock platform was alive with celebration. The two tribes had gathered, the air filled with the smoke of celebratory fires, the sound of drums, and the joy of a people united. Lotawana, radiant, stood beside her new husband. In the midst of the celebration, a figure emerged from the forest path, Norseredin. But he was transformed. The morose, angry outcast was gone. In his place stood a man with a calm face and a gentle smile. He approached the wedding party, his hands empty and open, his voice a honeyed speech of reconciliation. He apologized to Chief Shandaken for his past anger. He congratulated the Mohawk chief on his good fortune. And he bowed to Lotawana, professing that his heart, though once broken, was now healed by the sight of her happiness. He asked only for leave to give a single jewel to the bride, a small token to show that all jealousy and ill will had been stifled. Shandaken, a noble man, accepted the apology. The Mohawk chief, secure in his love, nodded his assent. The tribe, seeing this act of peace, murmured in approval. Norseredin presented a small, handsomely carved wooden box. It was an exotic, beautiful thing, clearly of foreign make. Lotawana, her heart open and trusting, accepted the treacherous gift. She smiled at Norseredin. He smiled back.
And she drew the cover.
A mechanism clicked. A spring flew forward, faster than the eye could see. It was not a jewel. It was the poisoned fang of a rattlesnake, affixed to the mechanism, which drove the needle-sharp point deep into the palm of her hand.
A single, sharp cry of surprise. Lotawana looked at her hand, a tiny bead of blood welling up. Naloop, Norseredin, was already gone. He had vanished back into the forest path the moment she took the box. Lokatana looked at her new husband. Her eyes widened, not in anger, but in sudden, profound confusion. She swayed. The venom was powerful, designed for a swift, terrible purpose. She stumbled, her hands grasping at her chest as the poison stopped her heart. In a few agonizing minutes, surrounded by the sudden shrieking horror of her family and her new husband, Lotawana lay dead at his feet. The joyous drums of the wedding celebration turned into the frantic pounding beat of the war path. The Mohawk chief let out a single guttural roar of pure, unadulterated anguish. Shandaken, his face a mask of stone, pointed to the forest where the Egyptian had fled. 20 of the strongest braves, armed with tomahawks and knives, set off in pursuit. Norseredin ran, but he was not a man of the forest. He was driven by panic, while they were driven by a cold, precise rage. They were the wolves of the mountain, and he was their cornered prey. They found his trail easily. They tracked him through the dense cloves, across the rocky streams. He was desperate, scrambling, his fine clothes tearing on the brambles. They overtook him on the Kalkberg, a limestone ridge miles away. He tried to fight, but he was 1 against 20. He was disarmed, bound, and dragged, screaming and pleading, all the way back to the mountain. They dragged him to the great rock platform.
The body of Lotawana still lay where she had fallen, her father and her husband kneeling beside her, their silent grief a terrible counterpoint to the murderer's terrified pleas. There would be no trial. The judgment was already passed. The braves began to gather wood. They built a pile of dry faggots, stacking them high, just a few feet from the edge of the great precipice that overlooked the valley. They untied Norseredden, only to tie him again, this time securely, to the top of the pyre. The torch was applied. Norseredden's pleas for mercy turned into high-pitched, agonizing shrieks that echoed from the cliffs of North Mountain and South Mountain, filling the entire valley with the sound of his terror. The braves, their faces painted for the wedding feast, now danced in exultation, their cries of justice mingling with the screams of the dying wretch. The man who had brought a serpent's poison to the mountain was now being consumed by the mountain's fire. The dead girl was buried by the mourning tribe, her grave a scar on the sacred platform. The ashes of Norseredden were left to be blown abroad by the winds, a final, fitting desecration.
But the mountain was no longer a home. It was a tomb. The wedding feast had become a funeral. The sacred ground stained by an outsider's treachery, and the smoke of a necessary, terrible execution. On the day of his revenge, old Shandaken, his heart broken, turned his back on the great rock platform. He left his ancient dwelling place, and his people went with him. His campfires never glimmered on the front of Ontiora again. The mountain was left to the silence. But was it truly empty? The Mohicans say that when Norseredden's soul burned, his screams became a permanent part of the landscape. They say his terror and his pain seeped into the rocks and the trees, poisoning the very air. Shandaken had left the mountain, but the horror Norseredden brought had not. It remained, a lingering curse, waiting in the empty glens for the next souls to wander into its domain. What power truly resides in those mountains? Was Norseredden's act of evil so potent that it permanently tainted the land? Or did it simply awaken something that was already sleeping there, waiting to be fed by human misery? Leave your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Tales Illustrated for more deep dives into the chilling folklore of our land.